In October of 2021, Canadian would release the Pulsar, which was the first Minecraft prison to not rely on roleplay. The Pulsar envisioned a future where a prisoner would no longer have to willingly go through an entrance process to be trapped. And it completely flopped. Not only could the cell be bypassed in multiple different ways, but fundamental flaws in the prison's design allow for escapists to go from above or below to break in. On top of that, the prison completely ignores wither escapes and uses regenerating trap portals as their only method of portal generation prevention. Now to be fair, this was only Ken's second prison. I mean, have you ever seen someone succeed with their second prison before? Okay, but in all seriousness, I think that the Pulsar's failures were a lot more nuanced than that. I mean, think about how much this prison was trying to do. It was attempting to be a cheat prison back when no one knew how to make a cheat prison secure. Ken wanted it to be fully functional without any self-destruct ban, and it had the task of making the second ever completely item-proof cell. In short, I think that the Pulsar was ahead of its time and a product of its time simultaneously. However, things have now changed. We know how to make a cheat prison secure. We have better item-proof cell designs and the most advanced area ban technology we've ever had, as well as the perfect way to detect break-ins with the use of skulk sensors. And I think that only in this modern era can the Pulsar's dream be fully realized. Welcome to Velox. Hey, sorry for not uploading on this channel for half a year. Wow, look, new prison. Whoa, how cool is that? Fun fact, Velox is not only the greatest involuntary prison, but also it's automatic too. Because, you know, the only purpose of the guard in the Pulsar was just to remove the ZPI that was keeping the prisoner there. Meanwhile, my prison doesn't use any ZPIs or anything like that. And so, no guards. Once you build the prison, you can just kind of walk away from it and the prisoner will be kept there safe and sound. Also, as is the case with any involuntary prison, this prison has to be cheap, and so, while I haven't counted the exact amount of blocks, I do think that it's around 300,000 blocks, maybe a little less, maybe a little more. Basically, this prison is separated into two sections. This first top section is kind of like the cell area. You know, you have the prisoner's cell here, which is chest minecarts, I'll explain that. Surrounded by skulk sensors, which trigger all the way down, maybe using this instant wall signal, and then going down into the main body of the prison, where the piglin ban is kept, basically. Skulk sensors trigger observer line, which triggers this piston line, which triggers this observer, and then this command block, which is meant to be a downwards facing piston if you were actually going to build this, but this is just, you know, for escape testing and such. And then it triggers down, breaks the shulker box, and it's given to a netherite piglin, pretty standard stuff. Again, the only thing this command block does is just send a message in chat letting you know that the prison is banned. If you want to replace this with a downwards facing piston, you just kind of have to set block it and it should be fine. Piston facing down, like that. I'm not going to do it. Now, the reason I'm dividing it into two whole sections is because if this whole section was brought to the area where the prisoner is, first of all, squilly becomes an issue. If your wither defense isn't at bedrock, then, you know, that's something you gotta deal with. And the second reason is because of portal generation. Since the prisoner's cell can be at basically any location, that means that you don't have the luxury of being able to place the cell below I-70, which means that portal generation becomes a lot easier if you have the whole prison moved up. And so the main body of the prison is all the way down here, and then wherever the prisoner's cell is wherever the prisoner's cell is. The prisoner's cell can be down at this Y level, or it can be all the way at height limit, and the prison's concept still works. Also, this prison is designed in such a way that even if you witherboard every single part of the cell here, and every single part that you can wither before you know, start chipping away at the wither defense, the prison still works, because if you wither all this away, it's all banned by a mob ban, and so that means that the prisoner is just sitting here in suspense in the air, banned, and banned inputs are notoriously limited by mob bans, and so you can't really do anything. Okay, I'll stop beating around the bush and explain how the cell works. Basically, when you're trapped in the cell, you're surrounded by chest minecarts and a little bit of wool. If you try left-clicking, then obviously you'll interact with the chest minecarts, and, you know, you're inside of their hitbox, so you'll just hit them and eventually break them, which will trigger the skulk. And then if you try to right-click anything, use any pearls, you'll just end up in that menu. So for example, if I get ender pearls like so, I cannot use it because I'll just right-click the chest minecart. Same applies with chorus fruit, same applies with basically all items. You're also in the crouch position, which means you can't even jump at all. You can't really do anything in here. And if you break one of the chest minecarts, this top chest minecart will fall on top of the slab that's above your head, and that movement will trigger all these skulk sensors right here. These armor stands are just to make sure that you can't just like blow up all the chest minecarts at the same time and then have none of these things detect. It's a very unlikely escape to work, but you know, redundancy, I guess. Now the thing about this setup is that, let's say you wanted to put the prisoner's cell at height limit, because you know, that's where you captured them for some reason. Maybe you captured them in a sky base, I don't know. Well, if you wanted to do that, that means that the time it would take for the skulk sensor up here to send a signal all the way down here would take much, much longer. And so this is why I added this little wall redstone thing right here. Yes, this is all possible to place without creating a redstone clock. There is a way. I've done it. Basically, all the skulk triggers this piston, which updates the center of this wall, instantly transmitting a signal all the way down here to the observer, triggering this piston, which triggered this downward skulk faster than it could get from up there to down here, if that makes sense. This snow right here is just to prevent any chorus fruit attempts from inside of this hole, and actually the reason this hole exists is because of portal generation, which again I'll explain later. The reason that there's this mid piston right here is because if you were extending this all the way to the height limit, theoretically, even though at the top it transmits down instantly, you could still theoretically go from the middle, and it would take a while to go up and then back down, which is why, you know, you'd add some of these things. If the cell is at a higher position, then you would just, I don't know, place these pistons around a little bit, maybe place like 2 or 3 of these instead of just 1 like I have here. Now before I get to the bottom section, I'm just going to show you how you would imprison someone in Velox, and the first way to do it is just like a modified version of the pulsar way. Okay, so let's say that this white concrete right here is the prisoner, right, and you want to imprison them. The first step would be to place an area ban, which we will represent with red concrete, right about here, and then the range of that area band will, I don't know, be orange stained glass or something. And so it will extend like that, and it will ban the prisoner. Now you need to make sure that you have the prisoner's coordinates from when they logged out, because the next step is to build the prison around the prisoner. Basically, you would start out by just like, I don't know, let's say the obsidian represents the prison, you would build the prison around them, but what happens when you need to build this side, because, you know, all of this stuff is banned? Well, if you move this band to a different location, say, I don't know, using rails and like a mob band, so it moves to here, and then you would move it around to here, and then you'd move it so that the prisoner stays banned throughout the entire time, but you're just moving the location of the ban. And now you can go on the other side and finish building, just like that. That's how you do it. Now that's a pretty simple way, but it is technically vulnerable to, you know, if the prisoner has their coordinates from before they logged out, they could potentially get someone to save them. I don't think that's a likely scenario, but I think it's a possible one, which is where the second way of imprisoning comes in. Basically, if you find the prisoner's bed, everything becomes so much easier, because if you find their bed, you can just build the entire prison around them, except for the cell. Then you would just like ban their respawn point, and then when they respawn, they'll immediately get banned. You just build the cell around them in like 2 minutes, break their bed, you kind of don't need it, and then you just fill it in, and then when they rejoin, they're trapped very quickly. Okay, so now that we've covered the cell portion up here, and how the prisoner gets imprisoned, let's cover this bottom section down here, which is where things get interesting. First of all, there's all this skulk on the roof, which is just to detect if you're mining straight down into here. This is just like a big skulk perception box. As you can see here, if I turn on X-ray, there's a ton of snow layers. You see I have snow enabled. And All of this, there's 2 layers of it just to prevent pro glitching, and if you break any of the snow at the bottom, it'll break all the snow at the top, which is detected by Skulk, and then it's sent through a signal to the center of the prison. I just realized that there might be someone watching this who doesn't really know how snow works, so let me just demonstrate. If you have multiple layers of snow, then break the bottom one, all of it from the top breaks instantly, and so that's the core concept behind this kind of defense. Next up, if we go to the bottom here, we have a bunch of Skulk around this area, and yes, there's Skulk underneath the wither defense before you get any ideas, just to prevent like pro glitching from below and stuff like that, which also sends a signal up to the center of the prison, which has, again, I showed you before I think, but a piglin ban right here that activates. Not only that, but if you try to wither it, you will be faced with basically the best wither defense we have currently, which is Ender Grid. It's a modified version of Hyther's Lava Grid with a bunch of waterlogged ender chests in order to, you know, prevent concrete powder filling up these water columns, redstone blocks in order to prevent flying machines and wither boars, and sponges are kind of prevented because there's just multiple water sources in each column, which makes withering in incredibly difficult and not worth anyone on a server's time. If you're wondering about a visiting process, well, I mean, unless you count like standing on top of the prison and holding F3A as a visiting process, then there really isn't one, unfortunately. The reason there is no visiting process for Velox is mainly because it's not a roleplay prison. It's designed for all servers, and so there's not really a point in having a visiting process if the prison isn't meant for roleplay purposes. That's usually the reason why you need a visiting process, but for this prison, it's not necessary. And I mean, yeah, an automatic, involuntary Minecraft prison in the modern era. The only thing that this doesn't do in comparison to the Pulsar is obviously not have a permanent ban switch at the center, because obviously there's a permanent ban switch right here. But other than that, I think I've done a pretty good job creating a nice successor to the Pulsar. And also, Okado, again, did a great job in this exterior, though I will take some credit for these little pillars right over here, because I did build these. I'd also like to thank all of the Playtesters shown on screen right now. Go subscribe to all their channels, they're really cool. And actually, specifically Canadian for suggesting the idea of not having the whole prison in one place, but instead separating it into cell here and then a big portion down there. He actually came up with that idea when I was trying to figure out how to patch portals. The world download is in my Discord server in the description, in case you'd like to, you know, escape it or maybe even try to build it on your server. One more thing to note is that this prison is intended for Spigot 1.19+, obviously because of the Skulk sensors, and also because there's an area ban down there. If you're building this on vanilla, then technically it works, but just keep in mind that the ban has a lot bigger of a range. But I mean, yeah, I guess it could work on vanilla. On paper, though, this will not work because paper patched area bans. If you'd like to know what server software your server is on, you can just go into F3, and then where it says integrated server, it will say the server software. I'm in single player right now, so that's why it says integrated server. I've said too much. Goodbye. Download it in the description. Thank you for watching. Also, I have a main channel. This is not my main channel. This is second channel. Goodbye.